but he was on Jules Holland, and he took a text message in the middle of the performance. I was like,
We're live.
We're live, Andy.
Yeah, so I was just recounting a story about text messages on Jules Holland. Yeah. We are live. Hello. Where are the cameras so we know not to look at them? One over there.
Oh, I just looked at it.
You just looked at it, don't look at the cameras. Hello, welcome to the Pencil Panel. We're here to help you get the most out of these fantastic range of briefs and that D&AD have put on. I've got some actual blur. Here we go. Yeah, so we've got a brilliant panel of 5 people. You can only see 4. I'm told there'll be 5 for you shortly. But our goal here today is to provide you with the answers you need to really nail these briefs and get the most out of them and provide a bit of topspin and help. So tweet us some questions, audience. You know, I think tweet them as well, and ask us those things that are stumping you. The briefs are fantastic, but some of them are tricky. So, you know, like, don't be shy, and we've got some good brains here to help you out. Before we start, I just want to say a thank you to MPC for this wonderful space. I need to read this blurb because it is particular and I can't remember it. But MPC crafts spectacular visual experiences. I think you agree with that. In any space, and on any screen. One of the global leaders in VFX for 25 years. Recently opened in Mexico, I heard, which is pretty interesting. I hope it's in Juarez, right on the border, or something like that. But they will do blockbuster movies such as Life of Pi, which won a VFX Oscar, and famous for ad campaigns such as Three's Mobile Walking Pony, as well as digital installations and contemporary arts. And they have a pretty sexy theatre, I might as well say, in the middle of. This is about a third of my office, and this is just your theatre. You know, so that's pretty awesome. I need to tell you that the entry site for these briefs will open. If I look down the gun, is that where I look? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You, if your entry site opens at 19th of Feb, and you have 1 month to upload. So if you have a really slow connection, then get with it on the 19th. Really slow upload speeds. But you've basically got 19th of March to get your work in. So that gives you, what does that give you? It gives you about 2 weeks to get finished. So if you're doing, let's just show of hands, you mid-brief, nods, yes, doing stuff, thinking about doing stuff. Put the hammer down, people. You've got a couple of weeks to get into these, and then you need to, you've got a month, so maximum about 6 weeks to get going. But get them in, get them live. Fantastic opportunity. So I'm basically stalling to see if Ian's going to turn up. He's still not here, so I can do my voice joke, which I wanted to do, but then I got scuppered because I wanted to introduce them like the judges on The Voice, but then like too many women turned up, and then there were 5, and it all just went tits up, to be honest. So I'll just do it normally. But this is, I'll introduce you to Iain Aitchison. Is that the best way to say it? Close enough, he says. Iain is a strategist with Plan, who do strategies for products and services. So a fascinating angle moving between physical and digital worlds and the future of products. So I think he'll give us some brilliant insights into that. Jack Renwick, running our own, I was about to say exploding, that's probably the wrong metaphor, burgeoning design studio, and a fantastic designer of great pedigree. So again, expect great insights and probably a little bit of swearing, if I remember from last year. Then we have Mike Reed, who has doubled his business recently, doubled the size of his business to 2, I'm told. But Mike is writing for brands, so specifically about writing. There's a couple of great briefs in there. I think the Sky one particularly is a really interesting writing brief that we can take on. From Jelly, a production studio, is that the best way to talk about your film?
Production house, yeah.
Creative production house. Charlie Sells, I love that surname. Like I think like it's actionable to when you phone someone up for work. It's like, I know what Charlie wants. And then the empty chair, the invisible man, is Iain Wharton, who, if I remember, is a very tall chap. So we'll see him coming in. A lovely guy who works at AKQA and will give us some real digital insights. So I'm going to stop rambling and get these people to do some talking, really, I think. But I've got a few just general ones that I really liked. One of them, I think this, but should I listen to other people's opinions? I thought that was a nice provocative way to open. A guy once asked me this on a panel. He said, "Why should I listen to you?" So I might aggressively throw that to the panel and say, sort of, should these guys, if they've got a strong idea and if they're passionate about what they're doing, how do they take on board this feedback? And should they listen to us? And how should they engage with this panel and the advice that we're given? So we'll just go across left to right. So I'll start with you, Ian, if I may.
I think listening is no bad thing, but doing it appropriately at the stage in the process you're at is pretty important. So, if you're researching, then you're listening to understand maybe more about the problem. But if you're in sort of creative mode and have gone towards a solution, then you're trying to ask questions to understand, how people relate to maybe what you're proposing. So I think it's maybe knowing why you're asking questions rather than a binary yes or no. So
listen at the right time.
Yeah, and ask the appropriate people at the right time in the process.
And then decide if you want to hear what they've said.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fair enough, I think. Yeah.
My gut reaction is no. Don't listen to anybody. Go with your gut. Do what you think is right. But I totally agree. You've got to listen to people who might know better at that point in time. But it doesn't mean to say you've got to do what they say. I think take on board people's opinions, but at the end of the day, you've got to feel it and you've got to feel what's right for you. So don't change your mind on something you feel strongly about because someone tells you to. It's like stick to your guns, but listen. That's important. Don't ask people's opinion looking for an answer for things. It's like you can hear some advice on things, but you need to know the answer yourself, and you've got to stick with what you think's right.
I just stole almost what I was going to say. I was going to say listening is not the same as agreeing. So I think listening is good. I mean, you should listen. I would argue, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you have to go along with what people say. You're absolutely right. You have to listen to yourself as well and listen to the brief. Keep going back to that and what that's telling you about the job. I find that quite often you can get carried away with ideas and find yourself going off kind of over here when the brief's over here, and listening can quite often bring you back again.
Yeah. So it'll keep
so it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah.
To all of that.
You've listened to all that. Hello, mate. How you doing?
How's it going? Sorry.
How was it? Was it all right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
This is Iain from AKQA. And Iain, I've just asked the panel, why should we listen to them? That was cruel, really, but he's late. You've got to drop him.
So my lateness is a metaphor for creative. No, it's not really. Why should you listen to me? Good question.
I think to contextualise, to help you a little bit in the thing, it's really at a point when these guys are working through their ideas, the value of feedback and the value of listening, as opposed to just saying, I've got the answer, I'm going to charge on and do my thing. How do they balance that?
It's super important. So, my perspective is the person who can't stay coachable is the person who's going to lose relevance pretty quickly. So, peers are kind of vital to a career. I think whether it's like kind of us in the immediate kind of now, or if it's a mentor and kind of someone to guide you throughout your career, I think you can't have a successful career without that. That would be my quick input into the question.
Which, in fairness, was a pretty damn eloquent answer for
Thanks.
And I think set me up really nicely for the question I was just looking at, which is a question from a lady called Sophia. And it says, what do you think the secret to success is in the creative industry? So I'm gonna dip into this, but who sighed the most when I asked the question, which is Charlie. But it's clearly a tough question. The secret to success.
I think that is key to anything, really, isn't it? I think it's a really difficult one to answer. I think you need to be passionate. You need to be determined. I think you need to be open to evolving and changing and listening. And being excited by what you're doing, really. I think success is, judged in different ways, and whether it's financial success or creative success or success of what you want to achieve, really. So, yeah, that's really hard.
I think mostly, I think for like I was about to say for you guys, and then I kind of went, it hasn't changed.
No.
Just it's hard work. Like really, really, it's the endeavour to do good stuff that will drive the success. You might get lucky, maybe once, maybe twice. You know, you might flick something out that just works. But most of the time, it's hard yards and hard work. But you know, it's still creativity. There are a lot of worse ways to sweat over stuff, I think. So, and there's I wanted to jump into the briefs really and get moving with some of that. And there's a really nice one from D&AD itself, I think, which is about, which I kind of think everybody should do. I think because you're all going to go out into the world and approach people. And so by doing the brief that says make your mark, it will help you sharpen who you are. And what's nice about it, it doesn't tell you be who you think you need to be. It says tell us who you are and why that's valuable. So I wanted to, I think I'll come to you, Jack, actually. The question is, how did you make your mark? And what's the story of how you really made your mark and got moving?
I won a student pencil.
I didn't even know that was going to happen. That is like the perfect setup question.
Yeah, no, but in order to win the student pencil, I had to work my arse off, you know, and I had to understand the brief, I had to understand the thing, I had to listen to people, and I had to go with my gut with what I thought was right.
And what was the this is an advert. What was the tangible effect of winning the student pencil into the world?
I guess.
Well, you're sat here today, very successful.
I guess it made me more attractive. You know, not that I'm not already. No, but it did. It just gets your attention. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people are looking for a shorthand when they're looking to hire people, and they're looking for reassurance, and they want somebody to kind of do the job for them a little bit. Yeah. And I think, you know, when you've won an award or you've won something and you start to circulate around more and you sort of start to rise to the top of people's conversations, then that gives you the leg up. Yeah. People don't need to hunt you out. You're already part of the conversation. So that made a big difference for me.
Yeah, that's great. So, like, if you needed incentive to get involved and do these briefs and win a pencil, there's clearly Luke, how did you put it before? If all the briefs are nice cheese, which one for you is the cheddar? I think was the cheese metaphor Luke gave me earlier. But I thought, given you've all had 4 briefs, I think, to look at, or 3 or 4, I think. But maybe, why don't we just dance across the briefs a little bit to get us warmed up, and then it'll give me a couple of seconds to look at this iPad and dig out some proper questions for you. But maybe, Iain, we'll start with you. Just cherry pick out a couple of points in the briefs that you were excited by when you read them, and some top line, really. So you had...
So I had WPP, Empower and
ASOS.
ASOS, yeah.
So which of those 3 was it, which I don't really want to kind of judge against, but what really excited you personally in them?
The WPP one, because it's about meaning, which I really like. In fact, all of them, I actually really like all of them, because there's no call for gimmick. I think that's just really great. And the ASOS one in particular is, you know, how none of them, there's no technology for the sake of technology. You're all and the reason I like it actually is because, so AKQA, we always say, you know, what can we do for our clients to help invent the future of their businesses? And because there's like meaning in that, there's kind of something tangible. It's not, you know, kind of a short-lived kind of flutter of PR. I think most of the briefs in that regard are kind of really great, because it's, I mean, ASOS was the one I really quite liked. I think they're all tough.
Yeah, I thought the ASOS one was tough.
Really
because,
tough,
how do you define the trend of the next generation in that sense? So how do you capture it? Where do you find it? Yeah, it's interesting. Very cultural.
Really difficult.
And I think that's a trend right across all the briefs, actually, but also just across good work, is that great work is also cultural work. It's culturally appropriate and effective. And I think meaning is an interesting thing. If you look around, that we are no longer able to hide as we once were in communications, because the internet has exposed the truths and the lies of everything, and so it means that our communications and our work needs more truth and needs more meaning, which you can play with, or excuse my French, fuck with, if you want to twist it the other way and mess about. So I think that's really interesting. So Charlie, you had the DCM cinema brief, the Nokia photography, the Excel brief that again was a capturing a moment, wasn't it? Which was really nice. And then the monotype brief, which I thought was a really challenging but interesting typographic one. What really caught your eye in there?
I think the DCM brief for me captured my attention just because I think it was quite emotive, and film cinema captures everyone.
So this was making a cinema ad.
Well, kind of little ident that will give, and it's to for all the audiences. So coming up with some sort of imagery or something that's going to reflect what cinema does and what film does, which I found quite exciting.
It was really highfalutin.
What was that? Sorry.
Just highbrow.
Wow. Okay.
You'll look that up and find out.
Yeah, I will look that up later.
I probably made it up or said it wrong.
But that one kind of intrigued me. I did think monotype was a tough one. I was sitting for quite a while to think how I'd approach it.
I love the idea of the monotype brief, if you've seen it, you're working on it, is to use typography to connect up the free papers and to ensure as free papers move into the digital world that they don't lose the human connection to the people selling the papers and why they sell the papers, which was a lovely social kind of aspect to it. But to solve it through typography, I thought was a great challenge. And so if you're into is that Nick at the back there, kind of looking smart? Hello, mate. Hiding there. I thought that was a brilliant brief actually to look at and a challenge, you know. So
definitely.
Maybe we'll get back round to that. And Mike, so what caught your eye out of the RAB, Sky, and the National Trust brief?
Well, I'm a writer, so the radio ad is naturally place to fall, and radio is a lovely medium, so that definitely piques the interest. I thought it was quite tough as well. You're right, they all were. The brief was about a radio campaign for Mile High, which is a kind of aircraft restaurant thing, pop-up, and which is quite a hard thing I would have thought to get across on radio. There's a lot of challenges there. And I immediately started wondering whether it was actually that great a product. But there were a lot of benefits in the brief that I wasn't convinced were benefits. Like, you'll never have a delay and you don't need a passport. Well, any restaurant can say that. So there's that thing where of learning that you don't have to go with what's in the brief.
Right, so that's good advice. Challenge the brief if you want to challenge it for sound reasons. Yeah, because I think it would all say in everyday life, in our work, that we will challenge a brief and push back in the right places and discuss it. The funny things briefs, they're written in little vacuums, and it means the person who writes them has such kind of weight into what they've written, and they're much better written collaboratively or when spoken of and shared, and therefore that person isn't so precious about what's being created. So push on the briefs and challenge them. You're in a good position to do that. I thought the and this isn't because I think it's Vicky who wrote the Sky brief is in the room, but I thought that was an interesting challenge to do writing for Sky and long form for Sky, because there's such, if you think of the content in Sky Atlantic or something like that, to marry advertising writing with the writing of, I don't know, a Boardwalk Empire or something, it was an interesting creative opportunity and to play with. Jack, I've got two things for you. One question: can I talk about the National Trust of Scotland in my response as part of the National Trust?
I would say...
I was just expecting a bang.
I would officially say no. While National Trust work closely with the National Trust for Scotland, they're a separate organisation, so Scottish properties would not fall within the brief.
Once again, I'd just like to say I had no idea. I actually asked Jack that because I thought she'd give me a funny answer. I had no idea you had a proper answer. We should work together more. This is perfectly
I've done my homework, Andy.
And so, Jack, you looked at the Purdy's brief, a real challenge, I think. Body Shop, again, a fascinating brief. British Council, really interesting, again, branding brief, and the National Trust brief, which I think is a lovely brief. So, 4 really good briefs there. Yeah. What jumped out at you?
I think what jumped out was the Body Shop, because the Body Shop's like a brand on the high street that I care about, I want to care about, but it's lost its relevance, and I might not be its target audience, but it's lost its relevance for me, and I think to try and give it some relevance and today's sort of audiences is a really interesting challenge, because it's a real challenge. It's like, this is what they really need.
They need to do,
and it's like, and they need people's help to do that. And so I think that's like a genuine problem that needs solving. And it's hard because they're a bit kind of lost their relevance a little bit, and a lot of people are natural beauty, and a lot of people are doing this kind of same ground. So I think to actually try and stand for something now is quite difficult, and they really need to reappraise where they're at. So I think that's it. That really stood out, because I want to crack it. I want to go and speak to them.
Have you found the client who pitched your business? So if you do that brief, send it to Jack, and Jack will take it to the client and keep it moving. I actually think all the briefs offer that. Actually, they all feel very, very live to me, and they could all do something. And actually, certainly with the more socially minded ones that are in there, you don't know how far your idea can go if you get this right. And they all felt like they could have some legs, and I know that. The guys would be super proud if the solutions could actually move forward and run. So you should treat them like that. Don't treat them as a trial run. Say, look, they're going to buy this from me. This is going to change the game. And then so just finish with you then. So BBC, Unilever, the D&AD and the ASOS brief. Where did you really come into that?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting for me about the BBC, Unilever, and ASOS ones in particular is this idea of they're about creating an experience for people at the end of the day. It's about really kind of creating a connection with an end audience that's actually meaningful for people. And beyond that, I think specifically the ASOS one, to go back to the one mentioned earlier, I think this idea of what's the role of a physical shop versus a digital shop in the current kind of context is really interesting. How do you kind of bridge this divide, and what's the purpose of kind of going online? How does that experience relate to the experience you have in the high street?
Huge challenge, right?
What's the sort of tactility involved? And that's a big challenge that most retail brands are dealing with.
And I think that challenge is picking up on a number of the briefs are kind of doing that. Iain might bring you in, given that AKQA would play in that space quite heavily, I think. So I think a couple of them are looking at how we move between the physical world and the virtual world, and the kind of, if you're old enough to play Elite, the which space that lives in between as you travel between them. But what are some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that provides?
Immense, actually. I mean, there's the first thing I would say, regardless of kind of platform, whatever it is, that the first thing the consumer says when a brand tries to talk to them is, "What am I going to get out of this?" Regardless of if it's online or physical. And if the brand can't answer that question quickly, with some meaning, add some value to the consumer or user's life, then it's just kind of complete pollution to them. That's my first thing. The second thing is that the physical. I mean, a lot of the stuff we do at AKQA now as well. Nick, who's here, connected products are a huge thing for us. And brands that are kind of bringing all their services, digital services, into your home. And a lot of them are great and add a lot of value. And the Empire one is an example of that. The Empire brief. Saying, what can we do to help people save energy? And maybe it's not something as simple as a digital product.
Yeah, I like that brief because I kind of read it and said nobody cares. Like, everyone knows they should care, but nobody cares. No one wants to look at the gas or their electricity. And what I liked about the brief is the brief knew it. It said, if you go through that lens, you're going to die. And so I felt that was a great creative opportunity for an app or a tool to say, do you know what, I'm going to have to make you play a game, or I'm going to have to bring you through your kids or something, because I'm not going to say, hey, check your gas meter. Because no one does, right?
And the thing is as well, like, we don't, I mean, I know it's kind of design briefs and advertising briefs and whatever, but especially now, like, we need to understand kind of the behavioural sciences about the principles and the behaviours about why people do things. And other brands have been really successful. I was talking with Nick about this actually in the car. Other brands have explored all different types of ways of getting people to care about that kind of stuff. And one was kind of gamifying it, which I think is a shitty term, but it works. And then another one was, competitive. You're competing with your neighbour, and there's
who can use the most gas.
And I think it turns out the competitive one was an order of magnitude better for the brand. So you need to understand behaviour.
I think also, but if you ratchet that up to the street, the city. You know, then you kind of you know, the kind of Britain's prettiest city competitions and things like that. That for usage of sort of gas, well, that might be kind of an interesting way to solve those problems, to actually kind of shame a city for like how much it uses or something. I don't know. There's interesting solutions need to be had for that, I think. Yeah. Without doubt. I'm going to go back to Charlie and Monotype. A simple question, but do you actually have to design and create a whole new typeface?
No, you don't. That was easy, wasn't it? I think I've got a few notes actually on this. You need to design a new typeface for the brief, but not use an existing one. You don't need to develop the whole entire typeface just to show it how it would work.
And I think that, like I said, I think that's quite a conceptual brief, how to use a typeface to solve that problem. So I think if you wanted to do a piece of beautiful classic typography, I think that would be fine to solve it. But if you wanted just to use typography in a fresh way or a never-before-seen way, I think that would probably cut it as well, and as long as it was kind of answering the facets of it. So I think the beauty of that brief for me was to use typography creatively, rather than say, I'm going to lock this down and do what type has always done, was to try and make type work a bit differently. And if you're bridging this physical digital world that we're talking about, then that's really interesting to look at type through that. I
think it's definitely a good idea to do research with all the communities and what you're actually trying to put across with the type. I mean, it is a tough. Again, I said I wouldn't know how to approach it. I'd have to do a lot of research to look into how to put all of that within final piece.
Yeah, it's challenging.
It is challenging.
But I look forward to seeing the answers that come out of that.
Yeah.
Actually. I think here's a good question, Iain, for you for the Unilever brief.
Yes.
You're checking your notes already.
Checking my notes,
They all got answers. Is that what it is? Does London count as a mega city?
Yes, it does.
It does. It's job done. Boom.
It's over 10 million people.
Is that the category? I was thinking it should be like the Google algorithm, and it should be the influences that the city has on the world that could make it a mega city. It would be a much more interesting. Mm-hmm. So again, if you want to cheat, we'll put a good word in for you about what a mega city is. But I think the brief is about behaviour change. Actually, in that. It's the, if I'm correct, is it? It's the Unilever brief.
I think one of the interesting ones about that one is, you know, how to do it in a brand relevant way that's meaningful and not, as you said, Iain, kind of forcing something on people.
Yeah, what right does Ben and Jerry's have to save the mega city, you know, in a sense like that?
And kind of starts from a positive standpoint. I think there's a lot of tendency to maybe in that sort of brief to kind of start from a kind of correction point of view. How can people kind of start from a creative, kind of positive standpoint on that kind of brief?
Well, I think one of the opportunities in that brief, and it goes back to this kind of purpose and value in brands and not creating kind of just more sort of flotsam into the space, is that a brand like Ben and Jerry's, or is it Domestos, I think, you have to look why they exist. You can't just accept that they exist. You have to write a purpose for them in the world. So from that purpose, you can find what value they can bring. Because Domestos can't just turn up and say, hey, we're going to bring a load of bicycles. Because you're like, what the hell has that got to do with what Domestos does? And so all of these brands, especially sort of the P&Gs and the Unilevers and there are other, you know, large manufacturers of goods, but they all seek to find purpose in their brand, and it is the natural. I think we'll pick up on this actually in the point. A natural progression of branding is brands. Now, why do you exist? We talked about the internet opening them up. Let's pick on that, Mike. You write for brands a lot. Brands you're working with seeking to explain their existence in the world more and more.
Oh, that's a good question. I think they are, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. They're kind of not being able to hide and having to justify yourself and all that stuff. It's absolutely right. My clients. I think as long as you've defined the audience, I guess that's the thing. You're not just going out and shouting that we are Domestos, but you know who you're talking to and why. That's the thing. So that kind of almost gets you over the justification. But if you've done the background properly, you know why you're justified and you know what the message is. It's the problem comes when you haven't worked that bit out and you just say, let's do an ad campaign, let's make a website, and just sit
for the sake of
flotsam, like you say.
I think again for you guys working on this stuff is you're in a you do have a little bit of free space to challenge what the brand means in culture, because I imagine they're going to want to listen to you. you know, because a lot of brands want to talk to you. And so if you're really looking at a brand, any of these brands that you're working with, you say, well, to me, you mean this in culture. That's good insight, and you can write off that. You don't need to be perfect, you know, or you don't need to do what they think their brand is. You can kind of look at that and reinterpret. And a lot of our work is positioning. So I think,
and the questioning of the brief again, like you were saying, how one person gives you their idea of what the brief is on their brand. A lot of the time, when you're developing and questioning and researching that brief, you actually find out something that they wouldn't necessarily have seen, or a different angle, and sometimes it actually brings a different kind of perspective for them to change the angle of the brief, and which helps lead to ideas and generating ideas, because it could be just one little thing that you've spotted within this brand that you could then develop into an idea.
So there's a value in there of, again, we've touched on it a couple of times, of confidence in your own point of view, I think, and even if you're completely wrong, like it'll be okay, you know. But I think there's, like, don't be completely wrong, be correct, or you could be. But I think, like, it seems a message from everyone nodding there. Ian, would you pick up on that about, like, having confidence in your idea, even if it's the wrong idea, is better than having no confidence and not getting anything.
Yeah, I think it's, speaking from experience of judging some of the briefs last year, there was one brief for Oakley, and it had quite sort of strict brand guidelines in a way, but in a way that kind of channeled people's response to a certain extent, and there was the ones that really stood out were the ones that challenged what really Oakley as a brand actually meant, and made you sit up and go, it can mean that as well.
Yeah, you need to be provocative as a creative, and culturally provocative.
So as long as you're doing that intelligently, of course.
Intelligently,
not just going, yeah, but you say you're that, but what about if you're this? You know, you can't just guess. You know,
it's not being Neanderthal about it.
So it's the rigour underneath your decisions. So have confidence, but make sure you can back up your thoughts.
Write
them down. I think. I like this question that said to the two, Ian and Iain, but around the BBC brief. What do you do when your target audience is the world? I quite like that, because that's easily the biggest, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Just get the world to do something, I think, is the brief. But
so we had, I guess, speaking to the BBC about that one, that where that came from was that they've got, you know, this massive global audience, which is kind of there, just kind of waiting to be tapped into. So how can they really intervene with that audience in a meaningful way? And so, kind of working with the BBC to craft that brief, it's really, you know, find the context that makes sense. That just because the scope of the brief is the world, like, find a community, or find an event, or find a story that's got some global resonance. So it might be, you know, going out, you know, monitoring the news and seeing where those sort of little threads of news kind of exchange between cultures, and you get this sort of transfer of ideas and knowledge, and kind of picking up on a thread and using that as something to amplify. So
rather trying to boil the ocean.
Yeah, find the context that you want to situate that in, and bring it to life through that context, rather than thinking you have to deal with every city and every platform and every possible type of news. Just kind of pick a little nugget.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree. I mean, and also to counterpoint that, I mean, technology is almost never, ever, in fact, the answer solely, but there are an enormous amount of benefits that technology can bring. So, for example, you know, just gathering data from users to know how you can talk to them with relevance. I mean, we do that all the time. We did with kind of AudiUSA.com. You know, it's one platform that speaks to a vastly disparate group of people with relevance, and you can do that through, you know, intelligent use of technology. So, but I entirely agree. But then also having mindfulness of the possibilities there might help.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just dance across a few briefs and pick out some thoughts that I liked on them, and by all means chip in or disagree with each other, or however whatever floats your boat really as we're talking through. But we were just discussing about challenging some of the briefs, and I think the one when I looked at it was the National Trust brief, because there's something in the brief where it says, you know, make us relevant to this audience. And I was like, screw that, make this audience relevant to me. I'm the National Trust. You come to me. And I thought, well, you literally come to me, I suppose, in the thing. But it felt like the brief was kind of saying the National Trust wanted to change its point, and that didn't feel right to me. You know, so where did you guys pick up who read that? So.
Yeah, I felt the same with the National Trust, and I thought, no, don't change. I've just joined, I've just paid my membership.
Do you think that's an age thing? Like, I'm 40 now, it could be I'm now in the bracket.
It could be, but they're trying to target 25 to 40-year-olds. And, but I think it would be a real shame if the National Trust, tries to become this kind of young brand, because I think that's part of its the reason to go is it's about heritage, and it's about stuff that lasts the test of time. So I kind of feel to try and funk it up a bit would just be completely wrong.
I'm pretty sure that's the word they use.
I think
it's in their brand book. We like to funk.
But yeah, I think you can make the thing relevant, but you don't need to change its core essence.
Yeah.
So I think that's got to stay true to the brand.
Yeah. So if you're working on that one, I think that's partly what made the tension in the brief very good for me. When I read it, I looked at that. And,
a brilliant problem.
But also, I like the architecture of National Trusts, and the way they look is very stylised. And I think they're actually quite cool places when you go and look at them, and you think way more interesting than you may give them credit for if you haven't been. So interesting tension there. Another one, which is actually a question I have on here, is to do with the Sky brief that says, why is a brand about visuals wanting a campaign about copy? I thought that was again a flip, that everything we've seen from Sky is you're looking through the logo. It's great big kind of HD shots, and they've talked about that, and they've brought the 3D, and you can look at it anywhere. And then the campaign is talking about writing and visuals. So where do you think that's coming from, and what guidance comes out of that?
I had exactly the same. I had that brief, and I had exactly the same question. And it obviously, in a way, had been cheated, if I can say that, Vicky, because it's a writing briefing. It's supposed to produce writing. But I think looking at it just as a brief, one of my immediate questions was, why are they assuming that writing is the right way to solve this problem? And again, that's a challenging thing. It's a kind of going back and saying, are you sure this is the right way? Can we not explore other ways? Or kind of taking another step back. And there seem to be some assumptions in there that might be brilliant.
You wanted to try and challenge the group.
Yeah, and that was one of the points.
I had a different perspective where I kind of felt that the great content on TV is written before it is filmed. And it's the writing that makes that content before the director gets to it and makes it something else or something beyond. And I think maybe it opens up a different tone for a brand that's had a very direct tone for a while, and maybe through writing, or maybe through a slightly different quality message of product. The quality has always been about the visual. I can remember the big frog or something like that. It was like crystal visual, and so maybe this is a chance in that brief to talk about the quality of content that comes through on TV, or the writing that's behind it, and to mirror that perhaps is a way to kind of open that up and think about it. And then you can imagine yourself, there's so much great content online by writers doing podcasts, just chatting to other writers, basically just chatting about how much fun they have and how awesome it is to be a writer. And it just, like, sitting in write rooms for Breaking Bad or The Simpsons, it just looks like the best job in the world. Sitting there cracking jokes all day long and stuff like that. So I liked it because I think it was a celebration of writing in a way, and that feels right in a sense.
Yeah, that just wasn't in the brief.
Yeah, I did extrapolate
really
all of that. I made all that. That's why we're here, though. I think is to make some stuff on top. Really, let me.
But also, the voiceovers aren't an accident. In there, it's writing. The execution's different, but you're hearing something that is incredibly considered. It's just a different execution of.
Yeah,
I think it'd be good for Sky to try and establish themselves as having strong content. Rather than always just thinking them as kind of pretty picture kind of brand, to drive home the fact that the actual writing and content behind the programmes is brilliant, and to give them another string to their bow.
Yeah, it certainly made HBO stand out, hasn't it? The kind of journey that they've been on. And Netflix are doing the same now, funding their own kind of content, and actually saying they're producers as well as kind of broadcasters. The Charlie, the Excel brief, I thought, like a lot of the briefs are about capturing a moment in time. Nokia photography brief is, I think, a very challenging brief. It says capture a moment in time that isn't transitory, and you're like, oh right, okay, there's a challenge in there, I think. So did you have any insights into how you'd go about that?
Again, that was kind of a tough one for me. I think it's very hard to capture one. Yeah, I think it's it's really tough. I'm not jealous of the person that's going to attack that one.
I felt like it felt like a real photographer's brief. You know, in a sense, it was nice to see that in the mix. If you are a photographer and that's where your passion lies, that felt like the kind of brief a brand would give you. Actually, you know, it was slightly juxtaposed and very difficult and a real head twister. So I guess the only advice we can really say is go and try. You know, because
I think it would be a lot of experimenting, a lot of just going out and relentlessly trying things out. I don't think it's something that you can plan to
the interesting thing, we'll talk about idea and execution in there, I think, because we value both so highly in everything we do, but I think certainly this year idea being in everything is really key to us, and I think that's the challenge in the Nokia brief is as you're taking photos, you have to think what's my story, what's the value of this moment, and what's my story in an image, and in a world of millions of images and streams of content, that's a lovely thing to stop and think about, is the value of this thing here. And so I would say when you're looking at a brief, really think of the value in the story and why you're telling the story of that image. The other piece that captured a moment in time was the Excel piece, which is brilliant. Excel has this brilliant list of cultural things that they've been involved in. Adele doing this or Radiohead doing that. And it felt like more of an illustration brief, but a lovely wide choice. Where would you go with that?
And that was so many fantastic moments to encapsulate. There was just no. I had so many images kind of racing through, but I think.
So how would you, if you were like, because I imagine if I was one of these guys at Illustrator or wanted to attack that, I would just go, oh crap, there's too many. I don't know how to make a decision. I want to do all of them. Yeah, where would you like try 4 and then just do the one that won, or? I would
definitely pick out a few that are that you have a connection with, and again experiment. I think again that is capturing a lot of information and the kind of emotion with each of those. But they've got some fantastic moments that they could pick out. That you could have so much fun with.
It's good advice. Go in and maybe look at 2 or 3 rather than plumping for 1 straight off. Because what you'll do is you'll go for 1, get into it about 2 days in, and you go, like this is shit, I'm going to do that one. And then you'll go, that was shit, and then you go back to the other one and go, it's not that bad. And then you'll start working, it'll be great. And that's the creative process in action, I think. The idea of picking off 2 or 3 early, what I thought about the brief as well is potentially just the resonant culture around it. We touched into the internet and physical and digital and all those kind of things, but around those moments in time were a lot of chat. They were all quite social moments. So I wonder whether when you look at those stories, you can go and look at a picture of what happened and reinterpret it, or you can go and look at the culture that happened around that moment and then tell that story. And I think in that you might find different ways of illustrating it. I think you could take it into the digital world or a graphic world, or make a much more cultural story off that brief in a really nice way. Let's go to the radio brief then, Mike. And we talked about that briefly before. It's the RAB brief, which is supporting. If I've got this right, I hope I've got this right. Tell me if I haven't. Which is supporting the restaurant idea to do with the heyday of flight. Which in itself is a pretty conceptual restaurant idea. Where would you start with trying to attack those radio ads to give guys a way into that?
Well, I mean, one of the obvious things to do would be go to the restaurant, and always, if you can, experience the product you're writing about. It's a fairly obvious thing to do. It's not always easy, but do that.
What shouldn't you do?
What shouldn't you do in terms of?
Well, I was thinking, I went, that's quite cool. I would use the tannoy on a plane. And then I went, I shouldn't do that. Because it's a total obvious idea. So I thought, chuck an idea out, trying to get these guys to think a bit further beyond.
I wouldn't want to start with what shouldn't you do, I think that's a mistake to start with a limitation. That seems a bit kind of counter.
So that's my problem. I guess what I'm trying to get is, I think it's full of cliche. that brief.
Absolutely, yeah, no, that's true.
What they're trying to do. They're trying to take a restaurant to a moment in time, and so it carries a lot of obvious metaphor because of that, and that's great, for an experience. But when you come to use the archetypes of that in a radio ad, you do fall into the tropes. You sort of
like anything, it's very easy to slip into the obvious or the cliche. So I work sometimes with Johnson Banks and the design company, and Michael Johnson says that I remember him telling me that when they started a brief, they got all the identities from all the other brands in that sector and put them on a big sheet and said, right, we can't do any of those, which I think is quite a nice way to start.
So really trying to find some direction, a fresh direction, I guess. Is
and sort of, but to kind of consciously recognise what those cliches are and kind of not just go, we won't do a cliche, but actually find out what they are and get rid of them. Because sometimes you work in a sector you don't know very well, and you think that's brilliant, and then you find out that everyone does it.
Although cliches can sometimes work. My favourite was
that's the other thing,
Burger King, when they brought the king back, and I was like, "My God, that works so well." All right, they did make him date a supermodel and stuck him on a super yacht and painted it like he was a Superman, but still they brought the king back. So
I think a twist on a cliche. Can be like the best starting point.
Yeah, absolutely right.
It's
you use the tannoy brilliantly, and it might be
maybe it'll work.
It might get you a pencil. And sometimes that is the bit that surprises you. If you start off thinking, oh God, they've done the tannoy, and then something lovely.
So again, that's a confidence point for belief in what you're doing. To actually say, look, I understand that this might be well trodden, but my twist will make it. I was referencing The Voice. That's what they always say. Like any music program, they always say, "You really made it your own." And I'm just like, well, you didn't make that comment your own, did you? Like you're all going to say it. But that's the kind of proposition that is you can take the classics and twist them and turn them into stuff.
As long as it's got a strong idea and there's a reasoning behind it, then it's it will work.
It's the principles of good storytelling. It's exactly the same. What does a good story do? Matches forces of antagonism against a good guy, and we all think we know how it's going to turn out, and then the writer goes, yeah, it probably is going to turn out, but not in the way you thought it was. Catches you off guard. And that's what if it comes out the way you thought it was going to come out, you leave the cinema going, what the fuck did I just do that for? The same with advertising. If we give them kind of what they expect, but not in the way they thought it would happen.
I think it's true. There's a sense of the pattern recognition. There's a comfort in. You're rewarding yourself for thinking you're clever because you've already figured out how it's going to end, and then the twist comes and you're like, oh, like that, and it's a surprise. But it's that comfort that makes you go a little further as well and draws you into the work.
And that applies to the WPP brief, because it's like talking about climate change in a way that no one has. Basically, if you solve that brief, you've solved the biggest issue that we have in the world. Which,
I saw a video go around saying this guy talks for 5 minutes and solves the climate change brief, right? And you watch it and you listen to him, you go, that makes perfect fucking sense. And then you look at the date and it was 8 years ago, and I'm like, it didn't work. No, it didn't work. It really is a challenge.
Should have done as well.
But again, I would say, hey, all of you have a go at that brief, because that's not a brief for D&AD. That's a brief for us. Change the world. There's an opportunity with someone with some bucks in their pocket to help you, and maybe you get to meet Al Gore.
Talk about recognition. Solve that. You're not going to be short contacts. WPP and Al Gore.
But also I just think, if you're creating books or if you're creating work to go and visit people, those are subjects that can open up a meeting and an interview. They're debates people have opinions on, and sometimes it can be, if you've seen a lot of books, it's not always great to see the same brands coming back or the same briefs, and so something with a bit more of a cultural provocation where you can actually get into a personal debate with somebody. You get to know the person. Like any interview, what they really care is this person I'm going to hang out with them for 10 hours on a plane. Is that going to be cool, or am I going to hate that? There's still that human connection that you've got to make in everything, and those briefs, they help you have proper discussions and real world stuff when you get to know people. So challenging that is key. The British Council brief I thought was really cool. I don't know how many of you saw that, maybe just Jack, but the brief is there is a exhibition in Moscow and London, I think, or two, but it's dual language, and it's about the fashion on screen, so fashion in cinema, TV and film. But because of its location, any signage and any branding has to be mobile in a sense, and I thought that was an interesting challenge. Again, literally I did it mobile in my head and said, it'll all live on my phone, it won't live in the space or something. But how would you approach that? Because they probably wouldn't buy that because it's too far out there and there's no physicality to it.
Yeah.
How would you approach that one, Jen?
I thought what was interesting with it was the notion of stuff that has got to communicate in a bilingual sense, you know, so you can't rely on language to do the job for you, so it boils down to quite sort of iconographic and quite instant imagery that's going to work across the world. And I kind of think fashion and film have to do that, you know, they're very visual stuff, you know, if you're looking at a catwalk, there's no one commentating on it, or, you know, if you're watching a movie, it might be subtitled, but, you know, that's what you're capturing. And so I thought to approach a whole exhibition without any language at all and do it just through imagery and iconography, I thought was brilliant.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You know, not to say anything. You know, just to see it through picture.
That's an outstanding steer. I think really interesting. Yeah, really, really interesting. Try and stay away from questions we've already determined the answers.
We'll answer all of them on Twitter afterwards, so we've only got a few more minutes left.
Okay.
So,
that was you said that. Can you say this? We've had loads of questions and we'll continue to answer them on Twitter, so stay tuned. On Twitter, I think. And by the way, on the monotype brief, you do have to create a new typeface. Do not listen to me.
So Charlie failed then, brilliant.
I mean, see, if you challenge the system comes down on you. Two general questions, let's rattle through these. So Duncan at Count_Dracula asks, I probably should read these before I read them. Really sort of fuck me up, just send me a tweet and I'll read it straight out. Other than encompassing all media, who do you feel is the defining factor? What do you feel is the defining factor of a successful integrated campaign? That's actually a very good question. What does the word integrated mean? Is what is Count_Dracula here? I wanted to look at him. No, you know, I don't want to presuppose. So I guess this is about like how big is integrated and when have I achieved integrated and when have I not?
It's like there's no limit to integrated. It's just as far as your imagination can go. It's like every touch point on the journey of life. You know, everything that you're going to ever interact with. Easy game.
So
the whole world.
You're saying you can just pick and choose that best show off the idea, because that's probably how I would do it. I would cherry pick the most effective touch points that I could think of that are the coolest ones.
So I think if the idea is strong enough, it should be able to work across.
Yeah, it should translate.
You know, any kind of medium or event or area that someone is going to be in contact with it.
That's not necessarily to say it should. Do go sort of them. But yeah, you're right.
Where you really know when your ideas are working is the person you're talking to starts to have their own ideas off your idea. Like when you're selling to a client and they start going, we could do, you just sit back, let them run, and then like sign the check. So again, an idea like that, you can really open up a conversation with someone about that. Where you don't need to go to all the touch points, but you can. They can say, you could take it there, you could take it there, and then you know you've got a good idea because it's building with other people.
And not using it for the sake of saying, and we can use it on an app.
Right.
I've
made an app.
Yeah.
Yes.
An important thing that I see quite a lot in books is, you know, people think that an integrated campaign is the same idea executed across 50 things. Yeah. You know, so it's you know, repetition is not an integrated campaign.
So to push on that, really, that's about understanding channel strategy of where you're placing each idea and looking at the strengths of the environments the idea is moving into and how that contextually marries with your big idea. I think is the way to really approach that.
I see the same thing, I'm sure you all do. You know, here's the same ad on a bus shelter, here's the ad on the side of a taxi, here's it on a bus, here's it on the tube.
In a book, turn the page,
you know,
it's on there.
And it's like making that specific idea relevant to that time and that place. And it's like, what would we do on the tube that is relevant? What would I do in a cab that is relevant? Whatever the touch point is that you've got the idea.
So understand the context of
make it relevant.
I think context is such an important word for us now, really, again, because we touched on it with digital data and other things, that the context can power those ideas, and an idea can understand where it is and what time it is, and the obvious one is whether it's raining or not, which is where all context apparently starts. But the ideas are intelligent things that are alive to their environment, and being aware of that will empower your ideas so much more than thinking they're static stuff. And I think that applies to a piece of branding or a piece of writing or a piece of interactivity or a strategy, that these things are alive now, and that's the exciting thing for all you guys messing with them is they just connect and keep living. Makes it a little harder, but it makes it way more fun to play with, I think. Josh Fowler asks, what advice do you have in regards to communicating the final idea? It's quite an interesting one, because I guess you could read that a number of different ways, but like, I guess there's a point of simplicity in there, would you say?
I think get to the point as quick as you can. It's like, it's thinking, what is good and clever about this? And telling that really clearly, you know, without all the kind of smoke and mirrors around it. It's like, why is this good? And tell me that quickly.
And would you accompany, like if that was an illustration piece or that was a piece of writing, would you then accompany it with a piece of sort of creative strategy underneath that did that? Would you support your work with a bit of think piece that said, this is why this is good? Yeah. This is why you should buy it?
Yeah, I would say, you know, what I'm trying to achieve is this.
We spend thousands of pounds saying this is what we're trying to achieve. You know,
I think it's quite a lot of the briefs are quite big and are potentially quite open, so it's having that kind of snappy summary of like what your insight into that brief has been, and then bam with a really good.
And when you write it again and again and again, because chances are you can edit it and twist it and change it. You'll take a word out, you'll overthink it, and then you'll wake up with it at 4 a.m. And again, that's the problem. You won't write it and it'll be perfect. You'll go back to it, and that'll tweak your brief, but capture that strategy and capture that big idea, and then burn it if you need to, and come up with another one. Like, don't be wedded to it if it isn't starts to break.
I think it's always doing that. You're in an elevator with somebody. I'm getting off at the next floor. Tell me why this is good. You know, that's it. It's like, tell me why it's good because I'm now leaving. And it's like, if you don't get to the point quickly, too late.
So I'm being told to wrap up. But I'm gonna not and ask you and ask you one other question. But like, just really quickly, what are you looking for? Like, one word will do for me. Like, right across left to right. What are you looking for from these briefs?
To be inspired.
Inspired.
Surprised.
Surprised.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. So that's what I said on Twitter.
Is that what you're looking for? Oh, that's what I'm.
Surprises, definitely.
Surprised, yeah.
I just want to be loved.
Loved.
I just couldn't think of anything else because you've all said it.
Delighted.
Yeah. So you can see that people really are looking for. Those are human words, right? They're all looking. They're not looking to be kind of educated or kind of like whatever. They're looking to be surprised and delighted. Get some love into those briefs.
And you feel something.
Yeah, some sort of emotive, something that's going to move you and make you think.
Yeah. Great. This has been question time. I'm not taking Dimbleby. And thanks again to NPC and the Pencil Files at AKQA. Anything you want me to say to that, or was it already off?
Yeah, she's gone.
Oh, they cut me already. They cut me off mid-flow. We're still even on. So, yeah, thanks for all the questions and good luck with the briefs. We're really looking forward to see what you come back with.
Thanks.